Welcome back to the history of the world, where we go over all of the history of gaming. Frankly, just everything from past to present. We just got out of the basically the Dark Ages. Your pinballs, your slot machines, your token machines, all of that good stuff, and we're hitting the late 60s, early 70s here with one of the big pioneers of gaming and probably one of the most recognized names when you talk about the early stages of gaming, Ralph Baer. With me today, as always, I got Brian Wonderboy on the mic. How you doing, buddy?
Yo, I'm doing well. I'm psyched to be back here for another episode of THOTW.
Right on.
And I'm as awesome as it is that we're moving forward here into more like actual tangible what we know as video games
Mm-hmm.
from where we've been the past couple episodes. I will say, sad to leave behind the era of setting pinball machines on fire, um, because fire is I don't know if this is endorsed by Dead Zone Entertainment at all, but fire's cool. Fire
Fire
can
is
be
cool.
fun. Yeah,
Yeah,
it can be
sadly,
fun in the right circumstances.
not a lot of fire in the future ages, but a whole lot of weird drama that takes place over the years of all of these things, and a lot of it stems directly from what we're going to talk about today.
Drama is its own fire. So
Absolutely.
let's get that Tinder going.
I do love. This episode is real fucking easy to research because Ralph Baer made his own website. Now, you can definitely tell when he made this website, but it's still up and being ran to this day. So it's all out there and readily available, easy to find stuff for his history. It's just a matter of actually putting it together. He even has on his website. This is, as far as I'm aware, the last video he had. Did a interview for PBS Digital Studios Inventor series, and that was actually a pretty good watch. We'll bring that up at least once in the show, but so you may wonder who the hell is Ralph Baer and why should I care? Let's get started as far as like how he ended up where he ended up, because he was born in Germany in 1922. Um, and at 16 years old, he and his family fled to Holland. Um, I don't think I need to really go into why he may decide to flee Germany in 1938, but yeah.
Hmm. Let me find a book real quick. I'm sure I can find something
Yeah, I'm pretty
something
sure
about
just
that.
like your nearest book may have something along the lines that a name bear may want to leave Germany. Either way, he came to the United States, and he worked for military intelligence in the United States. He actually worked. He got basically an associate's first, and he worked in France for several years for United States military intelligence, counterintelligence against Germany. Helpful that he had already been there, kind of knew some of the information going on as well. His interests and hobbies were in radio and other forms of digital transformation, which WW2 was really all about. So, you know, not a prominent figure in that since he was very young, but still helpful for the Allied forces in regards to, cracking all of those codes that were being sent. He returned to the United States in 1949, went to the Chicago American Television Institute of Technology. That's a name, I don't know if that exists anymore, to be honest with you. That sounds like something from the late 40s.
It really
Um,
does. I'm curious now. I'm gonna
yeah, look that up. I'd be
yeah.
interested myself.
Chicago American School of Television. Is that what it
Yeah,
is?
Chicago American Television Institute of Technology. That's the full name.
Okay.
But that's where he got his bachelor's in television engineering in 1942. Or 1949, excuse me. 1942, something very different. Anyway, his first job out of college was with L'Oreal in Bronx, and eventually Sanders and Associates picked him up, a United States defense contractor. So hey, he's got so many hands here. At this point, he already is, previously served United States Army. He has a full bachelor's, which was pretty big at the time, in television services, which was growing exponentially for, defense purposes, all of that sort of thing. So definitely useful to the company. Eventually, he ended up in the electronic design department. This is the part that is kind of fascinating to me, though. What they wanted him to do in the defense department, they didn't even make televisions. This isn't something that company did, but they did develop ideas for it. And one of his main jobs was to research ways to sell televisions. And that's where all of this really came from. So, one day, September 1st, 1966, he wrote down these notes. These are his handwritten notes in, good old classic HTML format. Hand scanned by the man Ralph Baer himself. Boy, this, I just love that Ralph Baer's website basically looks like an Angel Fire directory. Anyway. He did type up the notes, and that's a little bit more legible.
I would say so, yes.
Yeah, never said that engineers exactly have the best handwriting that ever existed, but there you go. Anyway, this goes over the very first idea. Now, you may remember something that contradicts that we've mentioned. But anyway, this was the first place for intent for making a computer gaming television thing, basically. A direct connection to the video system for broadcast TV signal, modulating an RF oscillator operating on one of several standard TV channel frequencies, and tuning the TV set to that channel. Channel LP for Let's Play.
Ralph Baer, the original LP.
Yeah, this is, this came out way before Slow Beef and, Something Awful forums, but hey, there you go. That is the original Let's Play. Either way, this is, he laid out several ideas, and at this point, it's all just ideas. These were notes. And he took the notes to the brass, and they said that doesn't have legs, basically, was what they told him at the time.
Wow. They just could not wrap their brains around the imagination of Ralph Baer.
Nope.
Here.
So, it was a few years later that, he worked on the idea, got more things together, and eventually did get a pitch in 1969 that would end up with a patent that they said, yeah, let's go with that for the patent. You can see here he has actual schematics in this for how this would function, how this would modulate the RF frequencies, so that you are actually playing a game. You got this real early joystick thing going on here. That is a fascinating diagram if I've ever seen one before. I think that's the first of its kind. But yeah, this patent in what year did I say? 1969? Yeah, 1969 is going to be one of the most big things for the next decade. There is a slew, just a litany of lawsuits and slung words over this specific patent, because this specifically patents a video game on a home set television.
Huh. So
So
it's
this,
not for like any particular hardware. It's like I mean, obviously there are like schematics here for hardware, but it's more so defining a concept as well
yeah,
for a
this is
product.
showing like how it's not necessarily stating this is the exact hardware configuration, but this is how we would configure the input to be modified in a particular box to be interactable by a person.
Hmm.
Um,
Interesting.
and they mentioned several apparatus types as well. An apparatus for playing handball by displaying and manipulating symbols on the screen of a cathode ray tube, compromising for generating a first hitting dot, meaning the generating a second hitting dot, means for generating a hit dot, means for generating a wall symbol. They went real into it.
Dig into the minutia of Pong right here.
Mm-hmm. Because, amongst other things, this little paragraph here basically defines the gameplay of Pong.
Yep. Let's get wrist deep in it.
Oh yeah, it's this by a historical standard, this whole documentation is fascinating because he essentially patented everything we will take for granted for the next 50 years in this one document.
Hmm. Now, before we move on to like some of the other stuff with the patent, obviously, I'm curious, like, because well, like we previously discussed just a second ago, whenever Bayer came to his superiors with this idea,
Mm.
they dismissed it
Yes.
completely. And 3 years on, we have a patent here. Now, I'm curious if you, in your research, came across whether the patent was like Bayer, like he filed it on his own onus in
Oh
a
no,
way
this
to.
this
Okay,
patent is owned by Sanders, now Lockheed Sanders.
okay. Because I was wondering if like this was his way of like, look, I drew this up. This is my proving point. Do you finally understand this 3 years later?
No, he. I mean, this wasn't the only thing he worked on over the course of those several years, but he kept coming back with further schematics, adding bits and ends until this was something they felt like they could write out and patent and actually sell.
Okay.
Yeah, this was all stuff to be sold to other companies, basically, which is something really big in defense that I didn't know about. That they sell a lot of ideas to other parties to do themselves.
I mean, it's not that surprising, honestly. That it's a lot of defense budget is spent on ideas, and then sometimes those ideas get pushed out to other people and that sort of thing. So, yeah, it,
Exactly.
it doesn't surprise me at all when it comes to that concept.
And once they had this patent out, Sanders and Associates gave him $2,500 to make a design that they would pitch. And that's a lot of money in 1970s money. Um, and he brought on two other people to work with him, Bill Harris and Bill Rush. So they were the team that generated the brown box. This is Harris and Rush on this image from vintagecomputing.com. They did have an interview with Bear at one point. So I just kind of took this from the interview. It's the interview itself, not really necessary to this, but this is the only picture I could really find of the two of them.
Hmm. I'm curious to know which one is the unknown Henson looking dude.
uh, the top left guy is Harris, and in the center is Rush.
Okay. Okay, cool. So Harris clearly had a vampire vibe going on. Sweet.
You're not wrong.
I'm into it.
So they worked for several years on top of that. I didn't expect it to want me to log into Discord. Hmm.
Oh, whoopsie. Well, maybe pull that window capture down and log in.
Yeah, hang on just a second, guys. I'm just gonna turn this window capture off for just a second. I think
Yeah,
I remember my own password.
certainly hope so. But it's all right. I forget passwords all the time.
Bingo, got it. Okay, so... Well, not the image. I don't want the whole channel, please. Can I just get the image? Thank you. Apologies for the technical difficulties. I just wanted an image and it worked before. That was not what I asked. There we go. What a good. Anyway, let's bring that back up. Find the right button. There we go. That was not exactly the one that I wanted, but whatever. It'll do fine. So, the brown box was something that they worked on for several years together. While that's up, I think I have another image that I do want to display of the brown box. But this was basically their design for the controls of it. A box with 2 knobs. And that was it. Not exactly the most comfortable or good feeling thing that you've ever seen. Let's see here. There we go. The original design for it, before Magnavox got its hands on it, looked a lot more like that, with 2 knobs facing up, and they basically covered it in brown tape in order to make it look better, fit that whole 70s aesthetic. So yeah, this is their original brown box that they spent the better part of 2 years pitching to different companies. And not a lot of people wanted it. I don't understand why. But it took a long time to actually sell it to somebody. But eventually, Magnavox would be the company that would pick it up, and they wanted to go full futuristic with their idea here. So, I want to show you guys a little bit of one of the original commercials so you get an idea of what the aesthetic they were going
the
for
electronic
is.
Game of the future. Odyssey easily attaches to any brand TV, black and white or color, to create a closed-circuit electronic playground. Odyssey gives you all the exciting action of hockey and 11 other challenging play and learning games for the entire family. Odyssey, a new dimension for your television, now at your Magnavox dealer. He's listed in the yellow pages.
I want to pause right there on that display because this is the full Magnavox Odyssey. The Magnavox Odyssey is not just a console, though. Look at that fucking 70s futuristic, sleek, white on black design. That is amazing. But what you're probably noticing is there's a lot of pictures and a lot of like board game looking materials. And that is because there is no AI in the Magnavox Odyssey. There is no real programming in the Magnavox Odyssey. There is hardware manipulation and transistors, etc. But basically, it is just taking your signal and it is allowing you to fuck around with that signal. Anyway, so the way they got you to actually play games using this was that you could move your dot around with these boards up. For specific, like one of these games is the map of the United States, and somebody says, "Hey, where's Illinois?" And then you highlight Illinois. That's the game. Roulette, You close your eyes and you spin the dials like mad. Until you hit, you don't hit a number until you stop. You open your eyes, and that's the roulette spin. This wasn't exactly, the high-end thing that you may expect. That did not come for a while. But that's what you got with the Magnavox Odyssey. At least out of the box, came with 12 of these games. The most complex of them was likely the light gun, which could detect if it hit a light or not when you pulled the trigger, and would make the screen flash so you would know that you hit something. And boy, that gun Peripheral, God bless, one sec. Yeah, let's just use that. Yeah, this is the Magnavox Odyssey gun Peripheral. When they say gun, they mean gun. This bad boy plugged in, and you still had to have a second player move the light around for you to shoot. And a lot of the screens for the shooting games were, opaque in some areas and clear in the others, so that the light could peek out in different parts of that map.
That is one sturdy light gun. Jesus Christ. Like, that's more realistic than the guns that are attached to, like, those Capella Big Game Hunter arcade cabinets. Woof.
Let's see. I thought I had this one. Yeah, there it is. But for the interest of history, what's probably most interesting they put together was the game one, the first cart they put out, Ping Pong.
Well, here we are, playing ping pong when we ought to be
Sounds like it has one too many words in the name of that game.
Yeah, basically, the dot would really only bounce left to right. If you take a look at the controller, the left dial is for either horizontal or English. So the ability for the dot to do anything crazy is basically up to the player to manipulate the English on the dot so that it curves more one way or another when it's moving. But it is clearly a two-player game, and there's no scoring, no time, no ability to really track much of anything, and when the ball hits the end, it just kind of whoop right back into the wall in the middle there. But this is directly recorded video of Bear and Harrison together playing just a little game of ping pong with each other. In fact, apparently the first game they ever played, Bear lost. So that is recorded history that the first video game ever...
The creator beefed it.
Exactly.
No, that's okay. I think that he has enough to hold on to in terms of a legacy than being a Magnavox Odyssey ping pong champion.
But you can see directly here, right, that the dot that bounces isn't really controlled by any AI or ability. It's literally the person tilting that English control, and then the paddles move based upon the right paddle, and I think you can go left and right with the inner control on the Odyssey. It was not a comfortable way to play a game at all. It fitted oddly in the hand.
It seems like a controller you would just rest on your lap.
That's basically the idea.
Yeah. Which is still an odd way to think about trying to like grip a controller and do anything with it. At least like, compared to modern controllers.
Right.
Intriguing.
And the way they sold it, like they first Magnavox would sponsor TV shows, and one of the TV shows they sponsored, where they first brought this out and announced it, was on a Frank Sinatra special.
Well, I mean, old Blue Eyes. Like, if anybody's gonna be hawking something in the '70s and get the attention of the lucrative video game market of, I don't, who was into Frank Sinatra like in the '70s? There's a lot of people, maybe not
Yeah.
necessarily the right people to latch on to video games.
Now, Ralph Baer often in interviews would say that Frank Sinatra was the first one to sell this, but that's not exactly correct, and it could just be, people interviewing him 40 years after the fact and pulling up the quotes. But no, it was during one of his shows that they first debuted to the good people of America the Magnavox Odyssey.
Terrific.
He sure is.
Frank will be right back.
So don't go away. And tomorrow, be sure to see all the holiday specials
This
at your
is
Magnavox dealer.
just wild
Outstanding values on Videomatic
to
color
think like
television
this is
that adjust your own
where
picture to
video
changing
game
room light
advertisement
automatically.
An
started from.
exceptional offer on Odyssey, the exciting
Yeah.
electronic game.
The
Special
exciting
prices on audio
electronic
component
game.
systems. Remarkable
Look at
values on
all of
magnificent
this
Magnavox
old,
stereo
look at
consoles.
all of the wood grain, all of this wood grain.
So much wood grain, and this is where you would get your record players, and boy, that Magnavox Odyssey, that
And don't forget this
futurist
exclusive
gift
Magnavox
to
album.
your
Real
future
collector's
self.
item. $125 for the record, $250 for the 8-track tape.
Come in tomorrow and see all the Magnavox
Wow.
holiday
The
specials.
70s,
What a difference.
man,
Only a
they
Magnavox.
really had their style
And there's
down.
never been a better time than now.
I will say this much though: the design of the Odyssey was at least the aesthetic of the Odyssey was a very smart idea when you look like at that black and white sort of like pseudo oh god, the name's escaping me right now. The Stanley Kubrick movie,
Oh,
2001: A Space
Yeah.
Odyssey. There
yeah,
we go.
Odyssey
Like-
directly in the name.
Exactly. It very much invokes that sort of motif when juxtaposed against all of the wood grain. Like it separates itself out so distinctly. Like whoever designed the outside of it should be committed almost as much as Bayer himself for the insides of it. Even if it didn't necessarily perform the same way that we would think of a video game console, even just a few years after its release would perform.
Yet still, with the wood grain.
Gotta get some in there.
Yeah, you had to have some for it to go along with your other electronics, right?
I mean, it really ties the room together. That and the surgical tubing.
Yeah, the that big ass thick tube that connected this honking ass controller to the Magnavox Odyssey that extended a whole 5 feet.
Hey, that's more than the NES controllers did, so I'll take it.
Yeah, so you may look at this and be like, why did anyone buy this? And it did sell decently, 350,000 units in its lifetime. But the Atari would basically come in eventually and eat its lunch, and there's a couple of reasons for that. The games are definitely one of the things.
Uh-oh.
Got it, don't worry.
Hooray.
So these were the initial 12 games that launched with it. I believe the 12 at top here: Analogic, Baseball, Cat and Mouse, Football. Any of the sports games were genuinely like you were supposed to roll dice in order to tell, like, hey, did you in baseball, did you hit the ball? Okay, you go to second base now, and you would keep track of where your runner was with the light on the screen. And they had multiple versions of the Pong game, the table tennis game, whatever they chose to call it at that specific time. and the light may follow a slightly different trajectory for each one. Like volleyball was more of an arc to where the light moved, but still had the same, circuitry logic, right? That it would just keep moving till it either hit the end of the screen or the light itself, or sometimes it would just flicker off and die, and you had to reset the whole console. These were things that could happen with the power of the Magnavox Odyssey. Also, like, mazes, that's basically what skiing is. It's just, can you follow the line to where you need to go? Using this awkward controller thing. Fun zoo. Hey, where's the tiger? There's a tiger. Okay. Cat and mouse, same idea. Big dot is the cat, little dot is the mouse. Don't put your light over the blue squares. What's to keep you from going over the blue squares? Absolutely nothing. Cheat to your heart's content. But if there was one big thing that really kept people from buying it, it had to be the price. When Ralph Baer pitched it, he pitched it as a $20 item in that day's money, which would put it at like 120 modern days. Magnavox sold this for $100.
Jesus.
That is $650 2020 US money. There's no
so
audio. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Oh no, I was gonna say we get our first lesson in correctly pricing your hardware. Even though we're still prior to the age of cartridge-based games, you still have to understand. You don't have the same business model back then, obviously, but there's no reason why you should be charging that much money for this.
Yeah, you would think Sony might have learned with the PS3. Hey, don't charge $600. That seems to be. That's your cap for consoles throughout history.
It's a 3DO. Come on.
Oh yeah, that thing was ridiculous. I think that's like $800 to $1,000 modern day money.
Yeah, I think maybe even more at this point.
Yeah, and you have no audio, no AI. A lot of this really was, a board game you played on TV. You kind of had to make up your rules sometimes and just go.
In concept isn't necessarily the worst idea, even with a lot of video games that have programmable AIs nowadays, like a lot of people will still infuse like their own house rules on certain games and how they play them. There are even plenty of games that have built in, customizable options for different gameplay styles and that sort of thing. So it's not necessarily the worst thing in concept. It's just, I think this thing was shooting way too far for where it actually could land.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, it's still it's an achievement. It was the first of its kind.
Yeah.
But I kind of understand why a lot of companies did not want to buy into this and why it took literally 6 years of Ralph's life to get this even floating and out on the market.
Now, a question for you regarding the console itself. So obviously this bore out of the brown box that Baer had previously been working on. And it seemed like in the patent document that there was an idea for like programmable AI in there.
Yes.
Or like the concept of it. Do you know why that concept didn't take the leap into execution with the Odyssey?
Oh, that's
like they're just like a limitation thing that Bayer had to work with, or...
Yeah, that part is easy. The microprocessor wouldn't be built, or it would be. It wasn't available for a consumer market until roughly 1972.
So like right when the Odyssey was coming out. Okay.
Exactly, which is why the Odyssey 2 did have all of that stuff built into it. And yes, there was an Odyssey 2, but by the time they got that fully released, Atari beat them to the punch on that. And Atari, as we'll eventually get to, definitely ruled over the era of the late 70s. They dominated without a without a doubt. And that company, there's so much to talk about. That's going to be weeks spent on the
Oh yeah,
heyday of the Atari.
multiple episodes.
Yeah, and we'll probably go a little bit more into the Odyssey 2 then, since, going over the Odyssey 2 right now would kind of be putting the cart before the horse. Just know that Sanders and Associates, as well as Magnavox, did not, did not go lightly. They wanted that market, and they were willing to fight for it hand and fist. So that continued to go. So that was Bear's involvement, and he continued to work at Sanders for quite some time.
Yeah.
That interview that I mentioned earlier at PBS Digital Studios, you could see him at home still tinkering well into his 90s. Yeah, this man born 1922, so what, he would have been 91 during this interview? And still sitting in his lab and tinkering and still putting out stuff. This is his original brown box that he still had. I believe he donated it to the Strong Museum. Either that or the Smithsonian. I can't remember which, one or the two. And some of the precursor you can see here of the ideas for the light gun. They had various shapes and ideas in mind while they were pitching it, not just one. But it's all, it's a light gun. The idea is, light flashes, gets picked up by a receptor, and then you get a response. But that wasn't really he wasn't done. He continued to work at Sanders and Associates. One of the other things you may know him for is he made the handheld game Simon. The memory game where you have to push the buttons that light up in a certain order. Yeah,
that game fondly.
He made that game while still working at a defense contractor. As well, he worked on the Mask cartoon and toy line. He was a part of that. So he worked in, games and toys basically his whole life until the point where he quit Sanders Associates. There's his full display of all of the different gadgets and stuff that he made commercially over the years. And it's a hell of a legacy. Whole lot of children's toys from the 70s and 80s are all thanks to him, really. And that didn't go without acknowledgments. 1986, or in 2006, George H.W. Bush gave him the Medal of Technology, which I wasn't even aware that was actually a thing that existed, but is kind of it's one of the highest things, sort of like being knighted in other countries, that you can really get. There he is at 80 some odd years old, with H.W. Bush receiving his award for his years in development of not just video games but other games and assets as well.
So it's basically like a science knight. He's a science knight.
Yes.
Ralph Baer, science knight. Put that on a business card.
Absolutely. It's like winning a Nobel Prize in some ways. They don't just give that Medal of Technology out in America very often, from what I can tell. So
no.
Yeah, it was definitely a big deal, especially for him. He was also introduced into the National Inventors Hall of Fame for his, time, and he is forever in the Smithsonian for what he has done. He continued to work for Sanders and Associates until 1986. It's interesting timing because in 1985, Lockheed Martin bought out Sanders Associates. It is now Lockheed Sanders, and then just, a couple months later, he quit.
Huh.
Mm-hmm. I think myself and Brian a little bit more than knowledgeable on the history of Lockheed and why somebody like Ralph Baer may want to quit. Given that we literally grew up in the shadow of Lockheed, or I did at least.
Yeah, I mean, I spent a good amount of time in the shadow of Lockheed.
So why a man like Ralph Baer may want to get away from that once they bought that company out, fairly obvious to me, but, I don't think he ever really said why, but he went on to be a contractor for years for multiple other people. Some of his information, a lot of things are still available here on his website. You had his contact information and all of that from here. The man wrote several books. Video Games in the Beginning is one of his mini books, and really it is one of the books that get referenced when, we're talking about historical documentation of gaming. It's known that Baer's memory can be a little shoddy at points, but he, the gist is basically there. So, I would say for anything Baer wrote, a tiny grain of salt is required, but you can, take for granted that the vast majority of his story is correct, and, he was very big on keeping documentation of everything. It's just, the way parts might come together may not always be correct. But yeah, it's a great book. Highly recommend it. Yeah, he's a good storyteller too. So if you ever get a chance to read Video Games in the Beginning by Ralph Baer, it's literally the documentation of the guy that was there that saw it all come together.
I like that the designer of Cruisin' USA gets a cover quote.
Right there between Dave Perry and Steve Wozniak.
Yep. Eugene Jarvis, which by all means, Eugene Jarvis, deserved name there, but just odd. Defender and Cruisin' USA. It's like two games that are oddly placed next to each other.
Did he do both of them? Yes. Were they important games? Yes. One more than the other, but okay. Howard Scott Warshaw, Yar's Revenge and E.T. Were those really, Yar's Revenge, but do you really want to remind people that Howard Scott made E.T.? Is that what you're here for?
Howard Scott Warshaw is one of those dudes whose name for the longest time was I don't mean to go off on a tangent a little bit, but his name has just been just mired because of the ET stuff for decades at this point. I'm glad that he's gotten some reclamation in the past decade or so, because that whole ET saga is just so overblown in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's not the worst game ever, and it's not the game that broke the Atari 2600. It was just the game that came out at the peak of Atari being Atari.
Yeah. It's also probably the single largest definition for why the video games market needed to crash.
Yes. I kind of point more at Pac-Man if you want to talk about games that crashed the market, but E.T. is the poster boy because it came directly at that time that everyone went, oh no. but that is a far different story. But it is fascinating to see all of these names together here in people that Bear has definitely worked with and definitely belongs along with all of these other, Dave Perry, Steve Wozniak, Howard Scott Warshaw. We'll skip over Eugene Jarvis. So really that only leaves us with what is the legacy of the Magnavox Odyssey. It is the first console to market. It is not the first console that people really think of when you think of, ye olde video games.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously the Atari beats other people, and even for people who really know their shit, often they mean like ColecoVision or Intellivision. It's been so vastly overshadowed by everything else that came out of the mid '70s that, it's more of a footnote. It is not strongly remembered. The games aren't, particularly great. You can definitely say the hardware will take a beating. That shit was made by somebody who understood toys and how hard they are fucked with. If you saw that cable for the little controller, that thing is a little twisty nightmare with giant fucking garden hose sticking out of the back of it. So yeah, it is a well-designed piece of media, and if it had been produced 2 or 3 years later, when getting a microprocessor available for home use was more possible, you may have seen a different Magnavox Odyssey. It may have been the Atari. It is not as if Magnavox did not put money and ass behind this concept. It was promoted for years, and they marketed the shit out of it.
I mean, the fact that they made a second version of the Odyssey speaks to their commitment to trying to make this market work for them.
Yeah, I don't think overall, I think they split even on the original Odyssey, and the second one did not do as well.
Well, yes.
Yeah, but we'll
obviously
get to that. But it frankly does not matter whether they won or lost as far as the market is concerned. They still won. Because, first off, they had that patent. And they would leverage that patent for years to come. Anybody who tried to enter the gaming sphere, if they did not pay for the patent rights, would get the shit suit out of them by Sanders and Associates. I don't think Ralph Baer really was terribly bothered by the idea. It doesn't seem from interviews with him that, it was his idea to go out and sue other people, but that's, part of working for, a big contractor like Sanders and Associates.
Yeah, I mean, it makes total sense that they would try and. I mean, we see this even still today, with Nintendo and other publishers and developers protecting their own IPs in that way. It's just this is just the original IP protection.
Correct.
Yeah.
And really the big one, though, the next episode is definitely going to be Pong, because Pong is where all of these themes kind of come together. And they were the first to commercially use table tennis, and some of the other things that we've mentioned along the way will definitely be brought up, because the lawsuits over Pong are going to be a huge consideration for what does gaming look like moving forward. And gosh, I don't even know if we'll be able to do Pong in one episode, to be completely honest. You wouldn't think one game would need hours to discuss, but yeah.
I mean, if that one game is like the progenitor of an entire industry, I think it might. And Pong is that. Without Pong, you don't get anything else. Anything else.
Yeah, this is the first home console, but this was the console that your weird uncle probably owned, right? This wasn't in most households. This is what 350,000 units sold, so 1,000 U.S. Citizens may have had it. So, yeah, your weird uncle who like really thought the future was now, man. He might have it, but not most people aren't going to have it. It was a weird oddity that was, oh, that's delightful.
I mean, and to think about it, like we look at it as an oddity now, but back then, like this was revolutionary. Even though like the controller is not well designed, the games are games only in how the mind can imagine them being games.
Yeah.
But to have this in your home and to be able to control what is on your television in that way, like I can only imagine like how mind blowing that would have been for 1972 America. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah, this was, as I said before, it's ahead of its time. This is really Bear in many ways was a visionary and definitely got the fame he deserved. I'm going to say that a lot of the people that also came about at that time, until the last decade and likely after their lives, weren't given what they really deserved because, Bear was the first. He was out there, and, then you had Atari, but a lot of the other parts kind of fell by the wayside. And, that's kind of part of what we want to do here is, we already, we talked about the Fairchild F and everything, and, as our episode 0, and frankly, they were long forgotten until like 10 years ago. They started getting brought up more often. Maybe more like 15 at this point, but still, up until the 2000s, the story was there was Ralph Baer and then Atari.
Yeah. Yeah, and honestly, it really wasn't until Jerry Lawson started popping back up again too.
Yeah, that was about the time, and yeah, even when Jerry Lawson was, noted, it was sometimes for, hey, you're the guy that made that obscure cartridge on the Atari, weren't you? Yeah. Not for a whole ass console that he made, not for an arcade cabinet. Yeah. But I mean, that was how electronics were made. Could you really tell me how your TV was made? Like, what the history of the people who made a TV were?
Whole lot of wood grain.
Whole lot of wood grain, absolutely. That's where all that came from. So it's not terribly surprising that a lot of these people did fall by the wayside, because it's like asking, hey, where did the handheld TV that was around the 80s come from? That was a big revolution that led to the laptop, right? I couldn't tell you where it came from. Anyway, yeah, that does it for this episode. We'll be back, on the 15th to talk about Pong?
Yes, we will start our Odyssey into Pong.
Absolutely. Thanks everyone for listening. Have a good night and a pleasant tomorrow.
Bye.